Well, as you can see, live images and footage, rather, on the screen of Buckingham Palace. The procession from the palace to Westminster Abbey is expected to start at about 10:20 a.m. BST.
Yeah.
That's going to take about 43 minutes. The King and the Queen Consort heading over in their carriage. Grand event, as we can see.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what the entire world will be watching for the next few hours, you know, from this time. Yes, like you said, the actual coronation begins around 10:20, is that correct?
Absolutely.
You know, but I mean, millions and millions of viewers all over the world. For those who won't be in London, like Ben said, so you can as well have the fun watching from wherever you might be. And I like the fact that our own president, President Muhammadu Buhari, will join the world leaders who will be part of the ceremony as guests and observers, more than 100 of them from all over the world in London. And we hope, of course, that the arrangement will not be like September during the funeral of the Queen. If you remember, Leila, that a number of African heads of government complain. Well, I mean, people complain on their behalf.
They were put on a coach.
On a coach,
yes.
You know, instead of limos that other Western leaders, you know, had. Thankfully, our own president wasn't there, and I think the Ugandan president, who was quite outspoken about things like this, was also not there. But hey, many of them are there today. Our own president, Muhammadu Buhari, is there today. Nobody is talking about coaches or bosses or whether you're treating the Western leaders better than the African leaders. I think what is important is the fact that something big, something huge is being witnessed and is about to happen. And it's the coronation of King Charles III, who, by the way, is a friend of Nigeria, is a friend of Africa, is a friend of the environment. And I think that that should be the key thing, really, that you know, people should focus their attention on.
Well, there are certainly controversies that will, to some extent, overshadow today. But yes, we don't want to hear about controversies such as African leaders being put on coaches while the President of the United States gets to come with his entire convoy of cars. Lots of guests already arriving at Westminster Abbey. The public is already out. Like Ben mentioned, people have been camping since Monday, hoping to get the best views of the procession, which is due to start in just over an hour's time. And to walk you through the route, the King and the Queen Consort are going to head down the Mall and Admiralty Arch towards Whitehall, and then towards Parliament Square, and then to the Abbey. Protesters are expected to be outside Trafalgar Square, and the procession is going to pass round that way. So that's going to be quite interesting to see. This procession is going to take about 43 minutes, and then the King and the Queen Consort will arrive at the Abbey just before 11 a.m. British Standard Time today, which is the time at which the coronation starts. And Mr. Steve, it's expected to last about 2 hours today, or just under 2 hours, which is shorter than the coronation was of the Queen back in 1953. It's been said that King Charles wanted a scaled down event, which included the time of the coronation itself as well. And then around noon, British Standard Time, the crown will be placed on the King's head. And an hour later, the King and Queen Consort will depart the Abbey in a gold state carriage and join at the end of the procession. Quite a full day of events, that is.
Absolutely. And of course, what will end all that after the final procession will be the fly past, when you have about 60 aircraft, you know, which will delight the crowds in central London in the 6-minute display, and will include, of course, the Red Arrows and historic Spitfires from the Battle of Britain memorial flights. I think that is going to be a beautiful show, really, because for me, it's a show, you know, it's a ceremony. It has all the religious, you know, inclination and everything, but it's a show, and I believe that it will be a beautiful, beautiful show, particularly for television. Those who will be watching from home, from all over the world. I do not think that we will see the the famous beast of the American president, because Mr. Joe Biden won't be coming.
Yes,
but his wife is
going to be there.
He's already there.
Yes.
Does she also ride in the beast? By the way.
That's a good question. I mean, I would think so. I would think so. So yes, it's going to be interesting to see as well what happens around several situations within the royal family themselves. You know, there's controversies around Prince Andrew, controversies around Prince Harry. And Meghan, who we know is not attending. Prince Harry is expected to attend, although he's apparently not going to have a role to play in the coronation. And what we can see right now on the screen is King Charles III coming in to Buckingham Palace, which is where the procession is going to start from, so to take his initial place for a full day of events. Back to London, England, from where we are now being joined by our special correspondent, Faith Orr, for an update on how things are shaping up for the coronation of King Charles III. Good morning, Faith. What's the public mood like?
Good morning. I have to say that there is so many crowds out in London. There is so many people coming from all over the world to celebrate. When I got the tube here this morning, I met a man from Pakistan, I met a family from Malaysia. They were all coming to London for the first time, all for the coronation. Now, the procession route was closed to the public before 8 a.m. because so many people had actually filed in there and filled that area up. Just after 8 a.m, they were announcing at the tube stations that Green Park was still open for viewing. There's big screens where people can see things. 7 minutes later, that was also closed to the public, so the only public space that wasn't full just after 8 a.m. was Hyde Park. But not everyone is joining in this sentiment and in the celebrations. We've seen the head of an anti-monarchist group called Republican being arrested near Trafalgar Square, lots of signs being taken away. They were all holding yellow placards reading "Not My King." The Metropolitan Police have bundled hundreds of those signs into a van and have cleared them away. They say they're going to have very low tolerance for anyone who wants to disrupt today's proceedings. But of course, this isn't what those groups were promised. The Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, had told them that they would be allowed to protest today, and that is not what the police are allowing them to do.
All right, Faith, first thing, what does the weather say? Do we expect that it will be clear all through? Do we expect that it will be clear all through? And give us an insight into the quality of foreign leaders and monarchs that are there to witness this momentous occasion.
Well, I'll answer your first question first. Definitely not clear. It's raining at the moment. That is expected to get heavier throughout the day, so that people who have been camping out all day, they are going to end up pretty wet, I'm afraid. That isn't going to stop the celebrations. You know, we will still see the procession. At around 20 past 10, the King and Queen will leave from here, from Buckingham Palace, and they will take the 1.2 mile route to Westminster Abbey. Crowds have lined that route, and some of them them have actually been camping out since Monday. So the weather certainly not putting people off, but very typical British weather here today. It is cloudy, it is raining. There are questions over whether the flypast will go ahead later on. That just depends on the weather. There is media from all over the world here. I mean, where I'm standing is in a row of tents with media from everywhere. There's the same at Westminster Abbey. There's people all over the Mall. As you were saying there, the world's media really has descended on London for this. It does seem to have a real global interest.
And Faith, I'd like to go back to the protests that you were speaking about and the issues surrounding that, how people with placards and banners are having those taken away from them, which is surprising considering that the police had come out to say that people could protest, although there would be zero tolerance for anything that seemed to go beyond what would be considered a peaceful protest. How is this likely to affect the planned protests outside Trafalgar Square? Have you spoken to any protesters? Will they still be out there or hiding away?
We actually have a crew at Trafalgar Square at the moment, and there are some protesters there. They do have their signs, but there was many more set to arrive. There was about 1,700 expected. Most of them have now been stopped. Most of the placards have been taken away, but there is still protesters there. I'm actually going to head up there once I finish speaking to you, so I'll be able to tell you a bit more later on about what's going on there. But it is that group that are being arrested, so it's certainly having an impact on that. And as you alluded to there, it's because there is a new law. It's a new public order law that's been put in place. Now, that isn't specific to the coronation, but it's certainly having an impact today. And what that does is it bans what's being described as serious disruption. So protesters can no longer do things like close motorways, which we've been seeing recently. We've seen environmental protesters do that. But there is this fear that it's impacting freedom of speech and human rights today, because there is a right to peacefully protest against the monarchy, and that right is being taken away, and lots of people are questioning whether that is proper and okay, and whether the police are acting properly today.
All right, Faith, kindly tell us more about the impact of today's ceremony on tourism. We're being told, of course, that all hotels are practically filled up in London. We're being told that the value of today's event is about £2 billion to the British economy. How big is this for tourism, for visitors? What's the impact? What's the significance to those who are not based in the UK but are just coming in to come and have fun and enjoy what's going on today?
Well, as I was saying earlier, I was meeting people who had come from all over the world to come for the coronation, as far afield as Malaysia, Canada, Australia, and they're just coming for the coronation. So it is having an impact on tourism. Hotels are full, especially in this vicinity. The prices have gone up. Restaurants are full. The city is much busier, but it's not just from far afield that people are coming. I was actually speaking to one woman, and she had travelled down from Newcastle, and she was meeting in with people that she had met in the queue to file past the Queen's coffin when it was lying in state here in September. So people who had come to London when Queen Elizabeth II died are coming back for the coronation. So it's also having that impact throughout the UK, where people are travelling to London for this. I think it is quite interesting that you do have these dedicated royal fans that will spend a lot of money, a lot of their time. They will camp out in the cold. Some people who have been sleeping out overnight to secure a good spot just for the procession to pass them. Some of them don't even have tents. They're sleeping under tarpaulins, and this is cold. I know it's early May, but it's London and it's not that warm. You definitely need coats at night. So this is quite dedicated from a lot of these people, I would say, that have come from further afield, that perhaps aren't spending big money on hotels. They just want to be there for that moment when the King and Queen pass them.
And Faith, there are several controversies that some would say are to some extent overshadowing today. Prince Andrew being one, and rifts with Prince Harry and Meghan being another. What more can you tell us on this? Is Prince Harry certainly in attendance today?
is absolutely expected to be in attendance today. He was at the palace yesterday. He drove past me in a car. That's the only reason I know that. I saw him leave. When it comes to Prince Andrew, he is much more the focus of protests. So that is one of the issues here, is that people are saying we have a right to protest not just the monarchy, but specifically Prince Andrew. Harry isn't facing that. He's not facing that level of scrutiny from the public in the way that Andrew is. Neither of them will have an official role in the ceremony in the Abbey, but they both are expected to be in attendance. So there are those questions, especially over the balcony scene, because that is one of the famous moments of days like this when the royal family appears on the balcony. And many people are questioning exactly what that lineup is going to look like, whether there's going to be, the full family and everyone, or whether it will just be the working royals, in which case it'll be a much more scaled down affair and absolutely will not include Harry or Andrew. So we'll wait and see exactly what happens with that. There are some suggestions. There could even be various lineups, the way that you would perhaps do with wedding photos, one group of people and then another group of people. So we'll see how that happens. But yes, as you said, lots of controversy surrounding today. We know that Meghan isn't in attendance. Certain sections of the British media don't seem very amused by that, I have to say, but we'll hear more as the day goes on.
All right, Faith, part of what the King Charles, will be required to do as part of the ceremony will be to pledge to be the defender of the faith in the coronation oath. But he will be doing that, as a Christian, at a time that you have Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister, you have Sadiq Khan as the Mayor of London, at a time that Great Britain is changing in terms of diversity, in terms of multiculturalism. What do you think of the symbolism of all this? A Christian Britain, a Christian king, but then he's been inserted in what he will say today, that he will be king to everybody, to all faiths. Do you think that this is very significant at a time like this in Great Britain?
I will have to say you did miss out one leader in Britain. You missed out Humza Yousaf. He is the Scottish First Minister. Not sure why I'm personally invested in that. But yes, as you said, Great Britain is hugely changing when it comes to diversity, and it is going to be a very different ceremony. So the King Charles will not just pledge to be the defender of the faith. He was going to acknowledge in this ceremony that he will be the defender of all faiths. And that is a marked difference to what we've seen in the past. And it is a reflection that Britain has changed a lot. It's been 70 years since the last coronation. This is not the same country that it was. It's much more multicultural. The cities have changed. It's just much the same as the whole world has. Every large city around the world has become much more multicultural. London is no exception. Britain has seen people choose to move here. Britons move abroad. It's the way that the world is going, and the ceremony will reflect that. It will reflect that Britain is no longer, or England especially, no longer just the Church of England. It's people have different faiths, they have different beliefs, and the King is keen to show that he represents everyone.
And the service is expected to last just under 2 hours, and I believe for the first time, members of the public will be invited to pledge allegiance to the King. What more can you tell us on this?
Absolutely. So the only person in the Abbey who will actually pledge allegiance is Prince William. He will be the one who does it in person. I'm not sure if you can just hear that behind me. We are starting to see some bands marching, just if you can hear that, that's what that is. But in an effort to get the public involved, people from all over the UK and around the world, if they so wish, are being invited to pledge allegiance during the ceremony. Now, it's not a case that they have to, it's just the wording is if people so wish, they are able to do that. It's a way of involving the public in the ceremony, I think. And that is just one of the other ways that this ceremony is very much changing. Although there are obviously still the very traditional aspects. I mean, we are watching at the moment just one of the bands marching past. Things like that will not change. All of the British pomp and pageantry will very much remain the same, but just a modernisation of the ceremony itself.
All right, Faith, I want to thank you very much. Of course, we'll still be coming back to you much later in the program. Thank you indeed. Thank you very much. All right, so we had a Faith Orr, our special correspondent, but from her, let's quickly move on to Juditha Da Silva, who is in our studio in London to get a different view of what's prepping up for the royal coronation. Hello, Juditha. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. We're good. We're following up on what's going on, but tell us what are we missing? What's happening in London, and what are the other side attractions that are going on outside of the fact that the main coronation ceremony will start in a few minutes?
As you've seen, around the main centre of what the procession will be from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey and back again, you've got they've always been very keen to have the entire country get behind this and celebrate as well. So what you're finding is that even where I live, there are lots of little parties being done in the garden or on the greens. There's lots of bunting out. Everyone's kind of having their moments to watch the coronation and be part of it in their own way. We know that there are going to be gun salutes from all the parts of the United Kingdom. There's going to be Edinburgh, there's going to be Belfast, there's going to be Cardiff doing the gun salutes. Again, because of the weather, as you saw with Faith, it's kind of rainy out there, and it's it's going to be moments to moments seeing what can happen, but it takes us back to 1953 and Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, where the most prestigious part of it, the most exciting, is the fly past. But they had to go down to the wire to see if the weather would be good enough for the pilots to go ahead. The same will probably happen today, but fingers crossed, as they pulled it off in 1953, they will do the same thing again today, and that would be the final cherry on the cake. But again, this is pursued to be something that's unifying. We know that King Charles III has been very conscientious about it being scaled back. When we've talked of pomp and pageantry, believe me, Great Britain can go a lot further. So what you're seeing now is a lot less than what they're capable of, but that's in keeping with the times and the sentiment of today, based on where Britain as a country is, socioeconomically, financially, and also with the world's gaze on it. They have to be seen to be reticent that this is a financial time of hurt post-COVID. So while it's a celebration of a leader who's aware of the sentiment of his people.
And Judita, King Charles is to become the 40th reigning monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey since 1066. How significant is this today?
When you think about it, you have to look at what England is, what Britain is as a country. It goes all the way back to Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great was a king who had a vision of a united England. Back then, this country was warring tribes similar to what you have in Nigeria. But he was a man of faith. That's why they called him Alfred the Great. He believed that you could turn the most savage of peoples, be them the Vikings or anyone else, and bring them under the faith and the belief in one God, and that would unify them as a nation. It was not until his son, Athelstan, who then they fought the word at Bernabath, that they actually started to make that come to fruition. There would still be battles beyond that, until William the Conqueror, became the king of a united England. And to have that be the beginning of the bloodline of kings and queens that would continue today with King Charles III, you begin to understand about why this country is so steeped in history and why it's called so great. Because the architecture and the design of what is Britain began before time was even recorded. What King Charles III inherits today, the pages he is writing today that we are all witnessing, the first pages of those books were written in 1066 after the Battle of Hastings. But then when you think about it as Nigerians, many will ask, like they did with the Queen's funeral, why are we so bothered? Because there is so much similarity, not based on colonialism. When you think of, for instance, my mother is Shakiri, she's from Warri. The amount of time she takes drumming into my mind the history of where we come from. We now have a king in Warri that has had to go through battles to justify his legitimacy on the throne, similar to what William I had to do when he had to convince people of his legitimacy as the heir of Edward the Confessor. There is so much that links us to Britain, but what you have to do when you watch this is see that the value of holding on to history, teaching history, passing it on. I can talk to you and be well versed in British history because going to a British boarding school, they let you know if you are in Britain, you will learn Britain, you will know Britain, you will respect Britain. Now I can understand it, and I see the fruition of that in a coronation like this. The same should be done in Nigeria. Tell these stories, retain these stories, protect these stories, and my King Charles III sits on the throne in Warri, and so will all the disparate tribes of Nigeria. So it's a beautiful thing to show an example being set, which all countries can follow.
All right, Judita, the Archbishop of Canterbury says that he's been preparing and rehearsing all week. What precisely is his role today?
What he's going to be doing is kind of officiant of the ceremony. We know it's at Westminster Abbey, and the Dean of Westminster, the Very Reverend David Hoyle, has kind of coached King Charles through all the steps of what he was going to go through yesterday and the day before. Prince William, Kate, and the grandchildren are all there. They've put together the mechanics, but the actual officiant will be the Archbishop of Canterbury. And so, because remember, part of the coronation is when the king swears an oath, which is to be a custodian and a servant of the faith. But there's going to be a different tweak to it because, as you see, Britain today, we have a Hindu prime minister, we have a Muslim mayor of London. He has to tweak the wording to recognize what Britain is now, and he will be a custodian of the faith of all peoples and those with no faith. So that's part of the things that the Archbishop of Canterbury has to do. He has to recognize that you are guiding King Charles to assume to a position with parameters that are so broad but so sensitive that he needs somebody that can guide him through it accurately. The same as what happened with the Queen Elizabeth's funeral. These people who occupy the positions, not only are they guardians of the faith, they're guardians of consciousness and awareness of what makes the country have the character that it holds today.
And what do you think this also means for King Charles's reign? Because this is a very different Great Britain to the one that Queen Elizabeth II stepped into in 1953 when she was crowned as queen. So what do you think this represents or signifies about the Britain that King Charles is going to be, or rather is already, head of state of?
I would say, in my estimation, King Charles III is probably going to have the hardest reign of any modern monarch that we've seen across the world. Because what Queen Elizabeth had was so many years on the throne, she almost became a seasoned veteran at navigating change and the evolution of a people. King Charles is coming in at a time where the way people are is so different. Social media, cancel culture, the proliferation of the desire for ethnic minorities to have more of a say and more representation in the books of history, in the social economy and beyond. What he has to fight for is the relevance of the monarchy in a modern era where people are so difficult to please, to understand, to convince that what was still should be. But the importance is this, is many people kind of snipe at the significance of the royal family. But if the House of Windsor should fall because King Charles III makes a mistake, Britain will never be Britain again. What he has to do is secure a tradition that is old in a time that is new so that King William can carry this on. Because for this to fall apart, if he makes a mistake when it comes to who he upsets, who he doesn't recognize, who he fails to provide for, stepping out of line within the understanding of a constitutional monarchy, working in tandem with a prime minister. These are things that reverberate deeper now than they did before, because the kinds of times you're navigating now, people are too savvy. But one thing he has to his credit is that he understands he will not be a popular king, but he can be a respected king. He's championed climate change from a time where people mocked him for doing so. But now people in the climate sector respect him because he stayed the course. So he's a dedicated person. That will be the leitmotif to the operetta of the King Charles III reign. He's somebody that could see ahead and see ahead something that would protect generations to come. That's something to be impressed by and to respect deeply.
All right, two questions that will be similar. First is to ask what happens after the formal ceremony. Will there be yet another dinner or lunch for the guests? What happens on the streets? What happens to visitors and tourists who are in London essentially for this event? And secondly, do you have an idea of the type of buzz around the Nigerian communities in London? I'm asking this because of the role that they played in September when the Queen passed on. If you recall, during the funeral, there were Shoebis, there were Ankaras, everything bearing Mama Charlie and all that. Are we likely to witness something like that for the King's coronation too by the Nigerians in the UK?
So first of all, what happens afterwards is the party truly begins. There are street parties planned all across the country and beyond to England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. That's when everyone gets to the festive period post seeing this historical thing happen. As far as foreign dignitaries, like I said yesterday, this is an affair of state. It's not sentimental like the Queen's funeral. They have to get back to the business of governing their countries, so it's pretty much going to be in and out. We know that today, not only is it the coronation, it's Prince Archie's birthday, so for Prince Harry, he's going to be hopping on a plane and going straight back in the hope that he can have the last few hours of his son's birthday with him. Everyone's pretty much got a life to get back to, and that's what's going to happen because their countries cannot see them to be engaging in frivolity, which isn't necessary. For the royals themselves, it will be pretty much a consolidation of how the day has gone, and then it's back to business because, again, they have to respect the sentiments of the time. Or a coronation belongs to the people. So that's why the concert is going to be going ahead. We've seen in the congregation at Westminster Abbey, Katy Perry was there. She's wearing a jewelry by late British designer Vivienne Westwood. She's in attendance, as are some of the others who are going to be part of that concert. But then the question about Nigerians, it's interesting to watch because it's split according to generations. Older generations are completely into it because they're throwing their parties, they're decked out in the Union Jack, they're lining the streets, they're talking to families. When you go to communities, whether it's Finsbury Park or even Brixton or beyond, the older generation, they're all the way in because it goes back to a time they still have within their memory of where this all comes from. But for my generation and beyond, it's very cynical because this is what's stimulating all those conversations you're hearing about. Why are they relevant? Let's delve into the questions of colonialism, all this pomp and pageantry. What part did slavery play in making it all possible? Who are we? But then that goes back to the point of the kind of environment that King Charles III has to navigate his way through. Because if you don't find a way to connect with late millennials and Gen Z, there will be no House of Windsor and a throne for King William to inherit and take it forward, because these opinions need to be understood and need to be kind of imbricated into the new form of a monarchy, because then young black people, young Nigerians will begin to feel that there is recognition for the part we played in today, because Nigerians fought in the Great War. Slavery fueled the royal purse. Nigeria is part of this, but we need to see it.
Interesting point, Judita. And what's more interesting is that beyond Nigeria and that generational split, you can see that in the UK as well. We had the British Deputy High Commissioner in Lagos here with us in the studio not too long ago, and I spoke to him about a YouGov poll that came out. As of April, only 36% of Britons aged 18 to 24 want to keep the monarchy.
Yeah.
And that's compared to 10 years before, where the number was 72%. So that's a huge drop-off in the space of 10 years for people between the ages of 18 to 24. And you've mentioned how difficult this reign is going to be for King Charles III, but how does one address that? Because seemingly younger generations are becoming less and less tolerant of the idea of monarchy.
I think you have to speak to the intelligence of people. For instance, one thing that King Charles has done, which you've seen, that he's going to be a shrewd king, he's going to be a pragmatic king, is that he sanctioned an investigation into the royal family's links to profits from slavery. He said, go ahead. But it's been limited to the time of the Hanovers. When you look at the royal houses that kind of went to the throne, the Hanovers they came after the Tudors and Stuarts, just before the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas who preceded the Windsors. Why the Hanovers? Because the four King Georges are encapsulated in that period. The last Stuart monarch was Queen Anne. Queen Anne was the most pivotal thing she did was secure something called the Asiento de Negros, which means the agreement of blacks. It gave them a monopoly to supply slaves to Spain's colonies in South America. And the profits of that were substantial. And the King Georges of the Hanover period all sat on the board of the South Sea Company, which is a parliamentary organization set up to fulfill that contract of the Asiento de Negros. What King Charles is doing is saying, I'm willing to be open. Once you are open, you then begin the conversation of true accountability. When you think about America, when they talk about reparations, back when slavery was abolished, they said they wanted 40 acres and a mule. They never put a money amount on it. What's the significance of 40 acres and a mule? Black people built that country. I want land. I want a piece of that country. That's more valuable than anything else. In Britain, you must write black stories and black names back into the narrative so they know, as we look at King Charles today, what paid for his crowns, where his jewels come from, why his family is so prestigious. It's built on the backs of black people. These are the conversations that King Charles is showing he's beginning to be willing to have. He said he regretted slavery when he went to South Africa. He's doing things that no monarch has done before, and that might count in his favor because he'll begin to speak to a generation that doesn't like to be pandered to. That's how he might find success.
All right, Juditha, very quickly before we let you go, this all boils down to one person, and then, of course, there are two, King Charles and Camilla, who, of course, will be the Queen Consort, not just to Great Britain, but to 14 other Commonwealth nations. What do you think will be going through our mind, Camilla, today? Will it be like a fairy tale story for her? What are your thoughts on Camilla today?
Very quickly, I will say that if Charles has a tough job ahead of him, Camilla has the hardest job of all, because she's stepping into a position the majority of Britain don't think she deserves. She's stepping into a position people are hoping she will fail at. And also, she's stepping into a position that people wish Princess Diana was in. She now has to deal with the sentiment of a nation that doesn't quite understand why you are there, which is very, very difficult. But what she's proven is that she is Charles's strength and she is his stay. That love connection speaks to them. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, challenged something that Harry wrote in his book Spare, saying that it was contrived and she manipulated and calculated to become queen. But Tom said that no, it was just a story of love. Things happened. It went the way it went, but it was a story of love. That's something they need to hold to, because in the way Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip had their connection, Britain respects the dedication they have to one another. So hopefully Camilla can ride that to maybe not success, but at least respect.
Well, Juditha, thank you very much for joining us this morning and giving us a great update on how things are going over in the UK. Sure, we'll catch up with you at some point later on in the day here on Arise News. Well, Arise special correspondent John Cookson is also standing by to provide some much needed perspective on the epoch-making events that are unfolding in London, England. We'll be crossing over to him shortly to find out more with regards to what's going on. For now, please enjoy some live images at the Westminster Abbey as the event begins. Special correspondent John Cookson is standing by to provide some much needed perspective on the events that are unfolding in London, England, as King Charles III prepares to receive the official seal of state and royalty. Good to see you, John, and great to have you back with us. Since we last spoke to you, what more can you tell us? What's been going on? The procession is due to start very soon, I believe.
Good morning, guys. Well, the party hasn't started yet, but it's about to, because at 10:20 Nigerian UK time, a historic moment. Charles and Camilla will leave Buckingham Palace behind me in the Jubilee state coach and take the 2-kilometre ride down to Westminster Abbey. They'll travel down the Mall where thousands and thousands of people packed in there waiting to say hello and good luck to the royal couple. Then the coach will turn right at Trafalgar Square, where incidentally, guys, there have been a number of arrests this morning of Republican protesters. The leader of the Republican Party has been arrested and the banners have been taken away. And then the royal couple will travel down Whitehall to Parliament Square and to arrive at Westminster Abbey for the ceremony that starts at exactly 11 a.m. The excitement here is palpable. The crowds have been entertained by bands of the Grenadier Guards. You can see a large police security operation behind me. Some 30,000 individuals involved in security for this event today, this historic event, a once-in-a-lifetime event for many people. There are one or two people in the crowd who do remember back in 1953, unbelievably, when Queen Elizabeth was crowned Queen, and they're still alive and still talking about what a magnificent ceremony it was. Today's ceremony, as you may have heard, is very much scaled back from what Queen Elizabeth had in 1953. Then the ceremony lasted about 3 hours. Today will just be around 2 hours. And then after the crowning, the couple will, King and Queen, will travel back the way they came to Buckingham Palace for an appearance on the balcony. In true British spirit, it's just starting to rain a little bit, but nobody cares because that's what happens in England, isn't it? And of course, no one wants to give up their place that they've got to watch this event. And then we'll see the royal family, members of the royal family, 8 working royals on the balcony, and the crowd will be allowed to come through the barriers that have been erected to cheer and make their feelings known. So a magnificent occasion, historic event. It's estimated that approximately 2 billion people will see these images in the coming day or so when they're shown and repeated on TV. It's a great privilege as a journalist for me to be here at an event like this. Guys.
All right, John. At the heart of today's ceremony will be when the Archbishop presents the King to the people, to the guests, and then they will respond with "God Save King Charles." Talk to us about the symbolism and the significance of that at a time that Britain is changing. Britain is getting, more diverse by the day. But then there's a Christian king that the whole world will say, "God save King Charles." How symbolic will that be when that happens in about a few minutes' time?
Hugely symbolic, of course, but more significantly, the crowd in the Abbey and people across Britain will be asked to say an oath to King Charles, which it says, "I will say that I will pay allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors according to the law, so help me God." Now, there's been some controversy about that because not everyone in the UK feels the same way about the royal family, of course. And this is a problem facing the new king. He has a quiet evolution underway in this country to fit in with the way that society is evolving at the present time. And we all know through Twitter and other social media that everyone has a view now, and those anti-royalists, those who abhor the royal family, they too have a voice. And so what Charles has to do is to step along a tightrope and to change the royal family as a concept, but not go too far. Because the people who hate Charles and the people who hate Camilla, they'll still hate them when he's made all these concessions. So it's a difficult tightrope for him to walk. Look, I met him a couple of times. He's an intelligent, he's a kind man. He's a sincere man who loves his country, and he's been trained for the last 50 years in the job, and I'm sure he will succeed as a monarch. Whether the monarchy that he's presenting to the UK is what the UK wants in due course, we'll have to wait and see.
And John, you mentioned that protesters are being arrested. You know, we had the British Deputy High Commissioner in Lagos in the studio with us who spoke about the beautiful thing being that people can protest freely on a day like this, but it doesn't sound like that's what's happening. Why are protesters being arrested? Is it for holding up placards? Is it for breaking the laws under the new public order bill or the changes to the public order bill? What are the reasons? Do you know yet?
I would tell you.
I must say that when I heard about the arrest, I was a little bit surprised because in recent days, the Metropolitan Police and other security forces have said that people will be allowed to protest, and we were expecting around 1,000 protesters of various ilks in Trafalgar Square. And so when news came through that the leader of the Republic movement was arrested, it did come as a surprise. And they got rid of all the banners and placards that they were going to hold up saying, "Not my king." So yes, it was something of a surprise, but of course it's a free country with a free media, and people are allowed to protest in this country, and it has raised a couple of eyebrows that one or two have been arrested already.
All right, so what actually changes from this afternoon? He's been king since the Queen passed on in September. But then from this afternoon, when the ceremony will have officially ended, what changes in King Charles's role?
He's going to take things carefully and slowly. As I said before, he's an intelligent man. I think he wants to change the concept of the monarchy. I mean, it has to move with the times as we pass through this new century. And it's not only the UK, the Commonwealth as well. There are grumblings there, and certain nations now want to become republics. I'm thinking of Caribbean countries like Jamaica, Belize. Even Australia said that perhaps in the second term of the Prime Minister's term in office, they might have another referendum as to whether Australia becomes a republic. So there are all these different pulling at the Commonwealth as an institution. Charles is absolutely able, I think, to deal with this kind of thing. He can accommodate, I think, a number of wishes. The Commonwealth can go one of three ways. It can completely collapse, it can stagger on, or it can adapt, and survive. And I think that's the route that Charles is going to take. I don't think he's going to waste any time. There'll be a quiet period, will there not, in the coming weeks. But I think that we'll see Charles making some profound steps towards change. He's 74 years old. He is, in fact, preparing the throne for his son, the Prince of Wales, William. So he is also a monarch in transition. So he'll be thinking about that too. So we're entering a dynamic period, I think, for the British royal family. There are dangers. He's traditionally supposed not to get involved in politics. If he does, I think that will be a danger for Charles because the lawmakers in this country think that they should make the laws, not the king. I'm just going to turn to just see what's happening behind. These members of the household cavalry as part of the vanguard for this momentous occasion. In about 20 minutes an hour, when the royal coach will leave, the men on horseback heading down the Mall, much to the thrill, of course, of the thousands of people who are not only gathered in the Mall, but are watching on TV screens, on huge TV screens in areas like Hyde Park and Green Park.
Well, thank you very much, Arise Special Correspondent John Cookson, for keeping us updated as the day unfolds. Time now to review headlines of today's newspapers.
Well, I mean, beautiful procession all for King Charles, but I'm afraid we will have to go. And which brings us to the end of the morning show today. Thank you for watching and do stay safe. I'm Steve Ayoringe.
And I'm Leila Johnson-Salami from our entire team here in Lagos, Nigeria. Enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.